Okay, so let's work through these two examples that we had. The first one with insulin injection kits, right? So here I'm given really kind of 2 points, right? So I'm given the initial price as 45, and what I know is that the price goes up, but the quantity stays the same. So the way that I would tackle these types of problems, and I highly recommend, by the way, that as you work on problems on the homework assignment, that you draw the graphs on the side. I know that, given their multiple choice, they don't ask you for the graph, but it's essential that you draw the graph to understand what it is that you're answering and what you're being asked, right? If you try to do it in your head, you're very likely to make mistakes. I make mistakes when I do it in my head all the time. And so when I answer these questions, I always draw it out, right? So this is a homework problem. I'm going to draw this out, and I'm going to draw out what I know. What I know is the price was 45, and we had some quantity. And I know that the price went up, but the quantity stayed the same. Okay, now there's kind of two different ways I can think of this as being true. So one way that it could be true, and it makes sense, is if demand is straight up and down, right? That kind of makes sense for insulin injection kits, right? Think about my willingness to pay is going to be very, very high, right? So I have to have the insulin injection kit. If I don't, I could have a very bad result. Typically it could be as bad as ending up dead, right? So I have to have this. So no matter how high the price, I'm going to be willing to pay. So if I have this, what we call perfectly inelastic demand curve, it's straight up and down, then what happened was supply decreased. That's one possibility, right? Is a vertical demand curve with a decrease in supply. That would cause the price to go up while the quantity remained the same, right? So perhaps it got more expensive to make the insulin injection kits, right? Maybe the insulin increased, or the materials that go into the kit increased in cost, caused supply to decrease. That's one possibility. What's another possibility? Well, we could have kind of a standard demand and supply curve. The price starts at 45. Quantity is Q1. I know that the price went up, but the quantity stayed the same. Well, all I have to do is draw a new equilibrium that goes through those points. So what could cause the price to go up but the quantity to stay the same would be a decrease in supply and an increase in demand. That would explain it. Or it could be that demand is perfectly inelastic or vertical. Okay, so it's taking the data or the information that I have, using the logic of supply and demand to figure out what must be true or what must have happened in this market. So let's take one of my favorite examples, this red pepper, green pepper stuff, right? So you might be thinking this is kind of silly, but this was something I thought about when I went to the grocery store. So I said, well, okay, red peppers are more beneficial for me to eat. So demand should be higher for red peppers all the same. If they have the same supply curve, then I should see more red peppers sold at a higher price. Instead, I see fewer sold at a higher price. And so I had to figure out what explains the price and quantity difference between red and green peppers. So what I expect to see, more red peppers sold at higher price. But it's not true. And so I want to understand, why is that not true? What must be going on? Now, if you know something about how you grow a red pepper, this might make a lot of sense. So let's draw this out here. I guess I could get really, if I really wanted to get fancy here, right? I could draw my demand curve for red peppers. Demand for red. And here's what I know, is that the price of a red pepper is $2.50, more than a green pepper, and let's say we sell 100 of those. Okay, now let's relate that to our green peppers, which I argue have a much lower demand. All else the same. Demand for green. They have a lower price, but we sell way more of them. So what explains the difference is that the supply of green peppers is much larger than the supply of red peppers. If you know anything about peppers, that makes quite a bit of sense, right? So how do you grow a red pepper? I take a green pepper and I let it grow for longer. Let green grow. In other words, it takes more time to grow a red pepper, which means it's going to cost me more, right? So the marginal cost of a red pepper is higher, which means its supply curve is going to be above or to the left of the supply of green peppers. So what I see makes a lot of sense. Red peppers, as a higher marginal cost, are going to sell for a higher price, but we're going to sell much less of them, even though they have higher demand. Green peppers are much cheaper to produce, and even though we don't want them as much, we're going to buy more of those at a lower price. Okay? So we're taking the idea of demand and supply, and we're using it to understand what we see in the world around us. If you really look and pay attention, you can explain a lot of what you're observing and be able to predict how things are going to change using this analysis. So it's very useful, and with enough practice, you'll get good enough at it to be able to make these types of analyses on your own. So what we're going to do in the next part of this chapter is to understand how we can mess this all up by trying to control the price.